Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Olainfarm, I'd like to welcome you to company's fourth quarter 2018 investor conference webinar. As always, we will start with the presentation, after which we will hold a questions and answers session. Please feel free to use the question box in the webinar admin panel to type in your questions, and we'll have them answered for you after the presentation. I would now like to turn the conference over to Salvis Lapins, the advisor to the board of Olainfarm, who will proceed with the presentation. Salvi, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Eva. Very nice to talk to you again after the publishing of our unaudited results for 2018. Of course, we'll be focusing as usual on the fourth quarter and the full year, but later we'll also, of course, look at what our plans are for 2019. So let us start. So fourth quarter, as you can see in the charts, it's the best quarter of ours in terms of sales. We missed 35 million euros just by a very tiny margin. Compared to the last quarter, it's an increase by 10% or by 3 million. Of that, pharmacy sales was 6.3. Sylvanols in that quarter alone sold the products of worth 1.8 million euros, and Tonoselas plus Elas Medical made sales of 2.6 million euros. So very good quarter indeed for all the companies of the group. Our profits are not as nice if you look at the chart. However, there are several one-offs both this year and last year. Good news are that we have a bit of smaller write-offs this year by about 1.8 million euros. However, this fourth quarter, we did not have an opportunity to reverse the deferred corporate income tax as we did in 2018, and that year it added about 3.3 million euros to the profit of the last quarter. In total, our profit is at 2 million euros, which is a reduction by 30% compared to the last year. Also, a forex loss, and this quarter is a bit bigger by about 0.6 million euros. So that's pretty much the entire difference you can see in financial expense field for the fourth quarter report. Now, some good news about EBITDA and EBITDA margin. In this quarter, trailing 12-month EBITDA increased very nicely to more than 20 million euros, which, as you can see, is the best number since about early 2016. Reason being something that I was telling in several webinars and meetings, that all the write-offs we've been having over the last number of years, they start to leave the 12-month period. So EBITDA and EBITDA margin is improving for second quarter in a row. So the margin is also up from 15% to 17%. And of course, let me remind you that forex loss, which derives from our receivables that they have in Russian rubles, they do not influence the EBITDA. So if you look at the fourth quarter alone, sales by countries, you see that Russia has been doing quite nicely in last quarter. Latvia and Belarus each lost about 2% of share in our total sales, whereas Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Poland gained 1%. Netherlands, that's the country where we normally ship the anti-tuberculosis products, is no longer among top 10. As you notice, in general, 2018, in terms of our relationship with WHO and shipments of anti-tuberculosis product has not been that great. Along with Netherlands, we also don't have Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan in top 10 countries in this quarter. However, we have Lithuania, Uzbekistan, and Japan, which was really doing quite well last year. If you remember, from time to time, we had them with 1%, 2%, and even bigger shares in sales. Now, a quick look at the whole year. So we missed our target a little bit of 130 million. So we made sales of slightly above 124 million euros, which is again a new annual sales record. Some increase, about 2% compared to last year. Pharmacies have set a new record of 23 million. Silvanos has set a new record, slightly missing 6 million in sales. And Tonoservice and Elast Medical slightly exceeded 10 million sales. So indeed, in terms of sales, very nice year for all the major companies of the group. Profits slightly less than last year by about 5%. And again, pretty much same effects. They have less write-offs this year. They have slightly smaller selling expense. And of course, smaller corporate income tax. However, we have throughout the year we have about 500,000 bigger forex loss than last year, and of course this year we could not reverse 3.3 million euros in deferred tax liability. But let me remind you, this is all these are all unaudited numbers, so some amendments, some changes, of course, are possible. We hope if they occur, there will not be any major ones. So where is the sales growth coming from? In terms of products, we see still vast majority of our top products in terms of sales are growing. Nurofen, one of our leading products, has been growing by 1.6 million, and Memantine, one of the products that we expected to become our best seller a while ago, has added almost 1 million to the sales. In relative terms, 331% growth was added by something called R-quinidinol, and Memantine that I referred to earlier also more than doubled in sales this year. PASA, again, anti-tuberculosis product that we normally were shipping to the WHO, or country pie chart was represented as Netherlands. That has lost 3.2 million euros, so pretty much vast majority of why we missed the sales target for this year. And Nerimidine for last quarter was not doing that nice, and therefore throughout the year it lost about 1.4 million euros in sales. And as for those of you who follow, you've noticed that our Russian sales have been shrinking, and Nerimidine is one of our best sellers to Russia. So that's where the reduction of Nerimidine sales is mainly coming from. As far as relative terms, it's still the paraaminosilicic acid that lost 81% of sales, and Remantadine lost 41% of sales. Remantadine regained a little bit of ground in last quarter, but still the year in general for that anti-flu product has not been that great. Now, if you look at the countries, again, 13 out of top 15 countries sales are increasing. Latvia added about 6.5, very impressive. So did Belarus, also quite impressive, 4.8 million euros sales increase. In relative terms, it's Japan, of course. The base is small, but again, the Belarus's growth is so impressive that even it is certainly one of our top 4 markets, they still managed to add more than half of their sales in 2018. So very nice performance there. And again, for those of you who follow, you may remember that we have acquired a daughter company in Belarus. That obviously that fact is obviously helping us to have better representation, even better representation with our own products in that country. And no surprise, the most loss, of course, comes from the Netherlands. We lost about 3 million in sales there, and about 2 million in sales we lost in Russia because of expected ruble turbulence. Ruble turbulence was not as great as we thought in the beginning of the year, but to some extent you start feeling the issues with the purchasing power in Russia. In relative terms, Netherlands 79% loss, and Georgia, although a smaller market of ours, but still 18% loss. So not nice to experience. Well, very traditional poll question at this point of presentation. Obviously, you've read our report before, and now you had a little bit more detailed view on that. And so the question is, what do you think of our our results of last year, are they what you expected? Are they worse than expected, or maybe they're better than expected? I'll give you a few dozens of seconds to decide and to click the choice of yours. And also, we are the ones that want to see your voting online. So if you wait a couple more seconds, we will see everybody will see what you think of our performance in last quarter and last year. So are we seeing that? Just as expected, it's 73% if I see. So yeah, well, of course, we always try to positively surprise our partners and investors, but sometimes the overall situation is quite uneasy. That performing as everyone expects you to perform is also not a bad development. Let's go on and see what recent developments there have been. And yes, surprise, surprise, we have yet another EGM. Nika Saveleva and Anna Emilia Maligina, who jointly represent slightly more than 15% of the capital, have requested that the EGM is convened. And of course, the board has to deliver, and therefore the extraordinary general meeting will be convened on April the 1st. The proposed agenda includes selecting the new council and new auditing committee and changing the remuneration for those, and therefore this is a very similar agenda that was proposed in November. And in that case, if you remember, by landslide, the proposals were not approved. Yeah, although the agenda includes new council and new auditing committee, as of today, we have not received any lists of candidates. Well, technically, there's still some time to go, but so far, we don't know who the candidates in mind are. So, yeah, and hence the next poll question of ours. It's slightly less than a month to go before the EGM, and we want high quality investors, we want high quality active partners, and so we wanted to know what do you think? Are you planning to attend? Or you are not planning to attend, or since this is more than a month from now, you are not sure. By planning to attend, I would also mean that if you're not in Latvia, or if you have a busy schedule at that time, you can also, of course, be represented by a proxy, by someone. Take a little time to think about that and make your choice. And I hope very soon we will see what the answers are. Yep. Well, it's quite even. It's I see it's 40% think they're coming, 40% think they're not coming, and 20% are not sure. So yeah, like I said, it would be very nice if you could come, because we want our shareholders to be active and participate in the company, if that is possible, of course. Now, another thing that was mentioned in the annual report, the dividend proposal by the board. Now, there is a bit of a history behind that with the replacement of the council, with the current council. One of the things that was done was corporate governance. Expert Ms. Aina Sozols was attracted to advise both the council and the board on good corporate governance, and proposals regarding dividend policy, of course, was on his agenda and still is. That process hasn't been fully finished, but there are some concepts that have been discussed, and the discussion is about the approach that a dividend should be paid every year. Up to a certain level, relatively small payout ratio of what has been discussed was 15%. Should be applied, and for anything above that level, much higher payout ratio would be applied, and we were talking about something like 50%. So the level of that base level we discussed, like I said, was 10 million euros. And of course, dividends are paid from the profits of the parent company. Although the final numbers of the parent company are not available yet, but we are talking about area of 9 million euros roughly. Therefore, the board is about to propose a dividend of 10 euro cents per share, or 1.4 roughly million euros in total, representing roughly 15% payout ratio. Yeah, and now a little bit of what we plan for 2019. So here are some selected figures from budgets for next year. You can see our main companies here. So we expect net revenues of Olainfarm being at 98, slightly more than 98 million euros. Latvia's Apteeka, we are planning for almost 3 million increase. Tonus Elast and Elast Medical, we expect to add about 1 million in sales, because there are a lot of trading going on between them, so you cannot just add revenues here and there. Silvanos, we plan to add another 5% at least to the sales. Our clinics of Olainmed and Diamed, we expect slightly below 3 million on sales. Biotest, similar amounts, and all other smaller companies combined, we expect to add 1.5 million in our sales. Therefore, the consolidated number, we expect to reach 133 million euros, with almost exactly 10 million euros in net profit. Because the next polling question is related to your attitudes towards these plans. Have a minute to have a look at them. So what do you think? These targets of ours, are they optimistic, are they realistic, or are they pessimistic? So in other words, you think we'll be doing worse than this, we'll be doing about this, or we'll be doing much better than what we plan? Take your time to vote. And then, of course, after the year, if a webinar takes place, we could have a look at what do you think. Are we performing better than you expected or worse than you expected? So maybe you can draw some relation to your attitudes to us then and now. And now, what are the numbers? Yeah, realistic. Vast majority, about 3/4 of you, think these are very realistic plans. Yeah, the whole budgeting process was really thorough, and of course we silently hope we can outperform these proposed numbers in a number of aspects. But then again, life makes some corrections here and there, and some assumptions are performing and some are not. So what the assumptions are? So the revenues of Olainfarm is 98.6 million, like I said. Meaning we already published January numbers, so 10% of annual plan has already been attained in terms of sales, and net earnings of 8.8 million euros. Group, we planned 133.3 million in January. We therefore have attained 9.3% of annual target, and we plan the net earnings of 10 million. And as you know, our Russian exposure is about 1/3 of our sales, so very important assumption. But we have assumed that the average rate of Russian ruble will be 78 rubles per euro. The current rate is somewhere in the area of 74.5. So if that ruble rate remains somewhere close to today's level, then we probably have some upside there. Yeah, and after this, the last poll question, I have 4 of them. Knowing what our performance in the last quarter and the last year, knowing what our targets are for this year, what is your current sentiment towards Olainfarm? Is it more bearish? Is it more neutral? Or is it more bullish? Please also take a while to vote. Yeah, it's It's about neutral. About half of you think half sentiment of half of you is about neutral. But yeah, then it's a little bit more bullish than bearish, but that's even more challenging to prove the bullish guys wrong. But yeah, let us move to the last slide with respect to our plans for the future. Now, the priorities in the budget. There's really one major priority, one major thing that the company will put a lot of focus on is the research of the products that we already have and we already sell. The reason being that Russia and several other countries, Eurasian Union countries, are tightening their requirements towards the dossiers of medical products, and therefore it is important that we bring our dossiers up to the required level. What that practically means is that our products are very well known and very widely applied and have been around for several decades now. And when they were launched back in most cases back in 70s, 80s, and 90s, they of course are fully tested by the requirement of those times. Now times have changed, and 30 years later, of course, the requirements that were okay back then are no longer okay, and different kinds of analysis according to different protocols and procedures need to be carried out. And that's exactly what we are planning to do over the next couple of years. So the total investment that we plan for 2019 is estimated at 7.5 million euros, with another 9 million euros scheduled for 2020. And should we succeed with that, should we complete the research, the studies, and the trials necessary to bring our dossiers up to date, not only we will safeguard and probably improve our positions in our existing key markets, but the improved dossiers will also make our possible entry to new markets more realistic, more possible, and easy, including potentially Western European markets. And the products that we're talking about really includes all our best sellers, including nerimidines and Norfens, adaptols, and nitrofurans, meaning furasols, furamags, furagins, probably, fencorol, and etazine. So these are all the best sellers of ours that will have their dossiers improved, and therefore we easier to sell and promote not only existing markets but probably in some potentially new markets as well. Yeah, I'm sorry, I think I haven't deleted one of the poll questions slides. So, and I guess I've run out of questions. So let's skip this one. And of course, the disclaimer thing that should usually be here. So that's it from my sort of official part of the webinar, and I'm ready to proceed with the questions of yours. I heard from Eva before that there are quite a few of them this time, so let's start with them.
Indeed, Salvi. We have to start. Let's take them one by one. So here comes the first one. Do you consider Olainfarm undervalued at the moment?
Yes, I would. I would consider it undervalued at the moment. There are several reasons for that. I mean, if you look at the performance of a company, you've seen that performance has pretty much flat for the last number of years. However, share price has dropped a lot for last 18 months, during the last 18 months or so. So therefore, I think, yeah, it is somewhat undervalued.
Okay, and then we have a follow-up question. If yes, why company is not considering buyback of shares?
Well, buyback of shares is, of course, a possibility. There are a couple of reasons that might not be a possible solution at this point in time. One of them being that such an investment would require some approval by shareholders, and as wide as possible. And that might be not that easy to achieve at this point in time. And also, like I said, we have a quite quite a sizable investment slash research slash development program as far as our existing products are concerned. And I would say that for the increase of the company's value in the future, this is somewhat more productive than share buyback. Eva?
Thank you, Salvi. You have covered the dividend topic before, but would you mind repeating once again, since we have a question from investor? Are there any dividends planned in future?
Yeah, like I said, it's been a few months since we are relatively actively discussing the dividend policy. And like I said, it's not finalized yet, but there are a couple of key concepts that the involved stakeholders support unanimously. And one of them is the main one of them is as long as company can, or in other words, as long as company is profitable, the dividends should be paid. So that's really the main concept that's having a full support. And then as far as the size of dividends is concerned, like I said, the current discussion is around the fact that up to 10 million euros net profit, we are talking about 15% payout ratio, and above 50%, above 10 million, we're talking about much larger payout ratio. Currently, what's being discussed is 50%. So that's the thinking. So yes, short answer to that question really was, are the dividends coming in future? Yes, they are.
Thank you. Does absence of acquisitions in 2018 mean that the company will be more conservative with regard to this particular means of expansion in the future, or is this year just an exception?
Well, I think it's more of an exception. I still see that if there are good targets around, the company might be quite aggressive if there are no other priorities at that point in time. Why there were no acquisitions in 2018? The reason basically is that an acquisition, especially if it's sizable one, requires decent support from the council and big part of shareholders. And those of you who follow know that in that, as far as these things are concerned, last year has not been all that quiet and easy for the company. So I think that's that, and the fact that no good targets were really available are the two main reasons why no acquisition took place last year. Eva?
Thank you. Could you please elaborate on the following claim? And here I'll be quoting. Previously forecast fluctuations of Russian ruble set the scene for expected sales reduction in Russia. End of quote. The statement is a bit unclear given that ruble's volatility wasn't exceptionally high in 2018. Salvis?
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't exceptionally high. We've seen many more bad years, much worse years than 2018. Still, we have about 500,000 forex loss, predominantly from ruble over last year. But the time when we planned the sales to Russia for 2018, which was late 2017, the factor that we had in mind were two factors really. One was possible ruble fluctuation or devaluation in general terms, and whatever is happening to the purchasing power in that country. And if ruble fluctuation indeed wasn't as great, then indications of a purchasing power are not as optimistic. So I believe we outperformed. We're outperform our Russian sales by about 1 million euros. I mean, outperform our Russian sales plan by about 1 million euros. But according to our sales reps in many locations, purchasing power is becoming somewhat of a factor. So we still probably did a good job planning our Russian sales cautiously. and just the reasons may be somewhat different than we initially thought. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Could you please clarify, does the received corporate income tax allowance of 4.64 million euro actually mean that Olainfarm will be able to deduct it from taxes payable in the future? Salvis?
Yes, I can confirm that, and not only in webinar, but in different calls from investors, I have received the same question. So let me clarify the whole thing a little more. So the whole thing derives from those of you who follow us for a longer period of time. Back in 2013, we got the government approval of our investment program. Now that basically is completed, and therefore, government said what government said at the time: if you implement this investment program, you will be entitled to certain corporate income tax rebate. Now we implemented the program, which took exactly 5 years, and during that period, basically corporate income tax was abolished. And now we have the possibility to rebate the tax that's no longer there. Now, there are several companies in similar situation, and we are of course in discussions with the Ministry of Finance and government in general about what to do next. But if with that rebate, but well, let me assure you, first thing, that asset is not recognized as an asset in our balance sheet in any way. So there's no risk of that being devalued or something. The most likely scenario as things stand now is that we will use this tax asset to cover for the dividend tax as we pay out the future dividends. Now this might take a while because formally in the respective law, accounting law, it says that the FIFO principle should be applied in these situations, meaning that since we have about 70 million of retained earnings, that tax asset could only be used, of course, for most recent profit, dividends from more recent profit, meaning that if no other agreement is reached, it might mean that we first have to pay the total dividends of 70 million before this tax rebate becomes applicable. Yeah, so there's still discussion going on. We certainly have sort of an asset which is not yet reflected in our books in any way. But if we manage to apply this asset to dividends that will be paid in the next couple of years to come, then that sort of virtual asset might turn into a real asset. Well, that was a long explanation. I hope I was clear. Yeah.
Thank you, Salvi. Chairman of Grindex, Mr. Kiro Lipman, has spoken on interview to Velta Puriņa at the end of year 2018 and said it would be a great idea to merge two good manufacturers, Olainfarm and Grindex. In this context, has Kiro Lipman approached the management of Olainfarm or with any other means tried to push this issue forward? What is the opinion of the board of Olainfarm about these Kiro Lipman statements?
Well, I haven't really, we do not discuss Mr. Lipman's statements in the board, but in general terms, this idea is actually started much longer ago than Mr. Lipman's interview recently. I remember it was actually one of the webinars, something like 2 or 3 years ago, when somebody from the audience asked that if we were proposed to acquire shares in Grindex, would we give a consideration? And I said that if that would ever happen, we would give a very, very, very serious consideration to that. As I remember, reaction of Mr. Lipman at that time wasn't all that optimistic. But yeah, I do think that as far as things like efficiency, of all sorts, really, would that be production efficiency, sales efficiency, administrative efficiency, whatever, could be greatly improved in such case. However, I mean, lots of things have to happen before that becomes possible. But I mean, that could both companies would benefit. That, like I said, that requires a lot of will on major shareholders of both sides, and that might require a huge amount of negotiations and similar activities. But as a concept, I personally see that would be a very great development for both companies and for Latvian pharmaceutical industry, for regional pharmaceutical industry, for stock exchange at the end of the day. So, but like I said, there are extremely large amount of things that need to happen before that's possible. Yeah.
Thank you. 3 months ago, in December 2018, there was a publication in investors portal Naudas Lietas.lv, which stated that Tonus Elast entry into German market and the factory acquisition deal in Germany have moved to finish line. As the finish line is not yet reached in the last 3 months, could you please provide more information on which date there will be official statement about the acquisition deal? If date is unknown, which month will it be? Salvi?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I really called it the finish line. What I recall, we were talking about two transactions, which was the German transaction and Danish transaction. And I guess at that point in time, I literally said that the German transaction is much more advanced. In December, the finishing line was not really that close. Now it's still ongoing. We are basically in early stages of financial due diligence for the German company, and so far we haven't discovered any adverse factors. So depending on what new information we discover and how active are our German counterparts, thing might be moving faster or slower. But like I said, this is pretty much a two-side business. There's somebody who intends to sell and somebody who intends to buy. As far as we are concerned, we are really ready to move much faster than we've been moving with it. And if the other party is ready to move just as fast, then I believe the deal could be concluded as a matter of a few months. Like I said, if no new bad information comes up. But again, it's not only us that can regulate the process. Yeah.
Thank you, Salvi. Could you please provide an update on Turkey market?
Yeah, the price agreement about neomidantan is I believe they're exchanging hopefully the last letters with Turkish authorities. Yeah, it's I hope it's happening anytime soon with neomidantan. With other products, this most likely will be somewhat postponed and restarted when we have done the research for the improvement of dossiers of the product, because that would then we hope will make our obtaining of market authorizations in Turkish market much easier. So in other words, neomidantan will be there very shortly. All other products will be later than than initially announced. But then there's a very good chance that several of them might make it to Turkish market at a relatively short period of time, as our dossiers will be improved. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question. Financial results are close to year 2017 results. However, the planned dividends are half smaller. Why?
Yeah, for a number of reasons, not least for the investment needs that they have in 2019. But the problem really is if you compare it to the dividends paid in 2018 for the profits of no, 2017 for the profits of 2016, then they're what, 1/6 of the volume. So the whole problem is that unpredictability of dividends, and we really want to come up with a dividend policy that is not based on ad hoc something, but is more of a longer term sustainable one. I describe you the key concepts, that might change as far as ratios are concerned, a little bit back or forth. But I think the best solution really is not to look at every single year separately and think how much it is that we're going to pay, but make it more stable, predictable, sustainable, and that's the direction we've taken. Yeah.
Will the upcoming shareholders meeting agenda also include approval of annual report and dividends, or will Olainfarm have another shareholders meeting?
No, it will not. At least the people convening or asking to convene this meeting have not asked for inclusion of that in agenda. Besides, it's more than clear that by April the 1st we will not have audited results. We will have to have another annual, not extraordinary, but annual general meeting, as we normally have in early June. So if all goes to plan, we will have a normal, regular annual general meeting somewhere in early days of June, where we'll be deciding on approval of the report. Dividends, maybe dividend policy might be presented at that time. So we will still need to have a regular meeting with regular, normal, routine issues. Yeah.
Could you please provide more details on significant capex for 2019-2020, please?
That's again. We'll have to start with maybe I'd go back to that slide if possible. Here we go. Excuse me. So many countries are tightening the requirements to the dossiers. Dossiers are the pack of documents that you submit in countries, normally drug agencies or called different ways in different countries. So you submit that pack of documents to the local authorities, the parts of the requirements that are related to how you have proven your claims or how you have proven your indications on the medicine have changed, meaning that if some maybe easier tests were sufficient 20, 30, 40 years ago, then more modern, more thorough tests proving the indications of your product are required now. So meaning that we have to redo parts of the dossiers for our products to maintain the presence of those products in a number of countries. They are not, luckily, full clinical trials because, like I said, the products have been on the market for quite many years, and there are still many elements of well-established use principle for those medicines, but still a lot of research, a lot of trials are required to be able to prove the claims according to more modern testing principles and abilities. And since we are talking about 6 of our main products, and since we are talking about relatively short period of time, about 2 years, we have the total planned investment of 16.5 million euros, vast majority of which we plan to finance from our own cash flows, but some loans will also, of course, be sought. And once we have improved our dossiers, meaning that we have safeguarded our position in our key markets of CIS, and also our files would be in good enough shape to be able to submit them for registration in several other countries, or many other countries. So that's the whole concept of, that's the whole reason for this relatively sizable capex for next couple of years to come. On top of that, of course, we also have a regular maintenance capex and some smaller capex positions, but this really is the priority for these 2 years as far as capex is concerned. Eva?
Thank you, Salvi. We have 2 questions left. What is the current status of disputes concerning the composition of Olainfarm board in the Latvian Business Registry?
Well, I'm not really up-to-date informed about the situation. There are a couple of weird things. I'm not a practicing lawyer myself, but there have been a couple of weird things how the re-registration took place. I mean, it's very weird that you can register you can make a new registration on person who has been deceased for more than a year. It's really weird that you submit 3 or 4 times the same application to different notaries, and that gets rejected, and you still keep submitting until one day it goes through. So there's a couple of issues that make you raise your eyebrows, like how was really that possible? But I do not really know the latest developments and about who is doing what and complaining about complaining or appealing about what. Yeah.
Thank you. Who is the current CEO of Olainfarm, potentially representing Olainfarm on the upcoming EGM?
Well, this I believe that not much has changed since I last inquired about that, and this is Milana Bilevica, the former council member of Olainfarm, that is now the CEO. But like I said, the situation might be changing there, or not that I'm very closely following the developments. Eva?
Thank you. Thank you. All questions are answered.
Okay.
So I think we're ready to wrap this up. So as always, the recording of the webinar will be available on Nasdaq Baltic YouTube channel and also in company's announcements later today or tomorrow. Salvi, thank you for taking time to walk us through Olainfarm's business and recent activities. And participants, thank you for joining and thank you for the interesting questions asked.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining in, and it's really nice to see that there's still a great interest, and still nice to see that we still have quite a good optimism about the company. So yeah, let's keep it up and running, and hope for more positive surprises in the future. And again, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.